So what we thought, as DaSH is 12 years old, the idea is that I would give a brief overview of DaSH and what's happened in the last 12 years. And maybe for those that don't quite know where the safe haven idea came from, or the changes that we've seen over the last 12 years, it would just be a little bit of an overview for you. So what is DaSH? So it stands for Grampian Data Safe Haven, and it was set up in 2012 by the University of Aberdeen and NHS Grampian, and it's for the North Node of Scotland. In an ideal world, within those 12 years, we would have got additional data from the Highlands and Islands health boards. We're working on that now, so it's been a long process. COVID did hinder that a little bit in that we'd had those conversations pretty much lined up just before COVID, and then that vast amount of 3 years kind of delayed a few things. So we are the North Node of Scotland. So for those that don't know, there are 5 safe havens within Scotland. There's the national safe haven, and then you've got the 4 regional ones that are based within the nodes. There are 4 nodes within Scotland, of which then the 14 health boards are kind of distributed between those nodes. So what does the safe haven do? So it facilitates safe access to unconsented healthcare data for research, whilst ensuring those high standards of security, governance and patient confidentiality. We undergo something called ISO 27001 accreditation, so that's our information security accreditation. It's a 3-year certification and involves annual audits by a UCAS accredited auditor, and as well as doing those annual audits, we also have to do an internal audit as well. As we said, we're one of 5 safe havens, and we have what we call the Scottish Safe Haven Network, and that's made up of DataLock, which is the Edinburgh University and NHS Lothian Safe Haven, which is 4 years old now. The West of Scotland Safe Haven, which is the Glasgow Uni HIC, which will be 20 years this year. Safe Haven's not that old because the Safe Havens only came out 12 years ago, but HIC will be celebrating its 20th anniversary. And then Idris, which is the National Safe Haven with Public Health Scotland. I'm also a member of Health Data Research UK Alliance. And as some of you will know, I'm the co-director for HDR UK Scotland. So we've got a big national presence, but sometimes Aberdeen does get a little bit forgotten about, so we have to sing our praises a little bit more. So we've said that DaSH facilitates access to linked data for research. When we first started, there were just 4 safes. There's now 5 safes. 5 safe framework is set up and recognised by not just the safe havens within Scotland, but the trusted research environment. So the names have also changed over those 12 years. So a lot of time now, rather than referring to them as safe havens, we would refer to them as a TRE, trusted research environment. And you also then have SDEs in England, and there's a big push within England for these SDEs to be established. So Scotland and Wales have been ahead of the game for a long time, and now the focus does seem to be within the SDEs within England and talk about that, you know, these are new things, when in reality they are very similar to the trusted research environments or safe havens. So what are the 5 safes? Well, they are the safe people, projects, data, setting and outputs. What we're looking at around that is approved information governance trained researchers that have to sign an investigator declaration. We've got safe projects, so this is where projects with the relevant project permissions and approvals are in place. Safe data, so the fact that the data that researchers are accessing is identified by DaSH analysts, and we pseudonymize data. It's what's accessed by researchers. If you don't know what pseudonymized mean, it basically means that there is a unique identifier that can be linked back to the patient if we so needed to. So it's not fully anonymized. We then have what we call safe settings. So researchers access their data within a secure platform. There's no internet, there's no ability to copy and paste or print, and you don't get to take the data away with you. You could release what we call safe outputs, and these are disclosure checked and approved for release, and there'd be no patient level data, and small counts of less than 5 are not released either. Each of our projects, I've also got this on another slide, but as the DaSH analysts will definitely tell you in this room, there's no such thing now as a standard DaSH project. When we started, the projects were maybe not as complex as they are now, and you probably did have some standard projects in where we would link to health records based on a CHI number, so the Community Health Index number. So everyone within Scotland gets a CHI number. It's 10 digits long. It's made up of the first 6 letters are your date of birth. When they invented it, they obviously didn't take into account that we'd be moving to a new century. And it was only invented in early 80s, so the fact that they didn't expect a new century. So it is sometimes interesting to get that date of birth. It also will indicate what sex people are. We now have access to a vast amount of data within Grampian. We've got our SMR data set, so those are all your hospital records, TrackCare, which is your patient management system. We've got lab data, still waiting on 2 of those data sets, but we are getting there. We've had access to radiology images, clinical free text. We also don't release some variables, so we wouldn't release date of birth, for instance, but we would release age at a particular time. Likewise, we don't tend to release postcodes, but we would give you a deprivation score. The process is that we tend to build a cohort based on specifications. We will then extract that data on our NHS side. So we're quite a unique safe haven in that we have access to both NHS systems and the university systems, which means that the analysts have 2 laptops, 2 email accounts, 2 contracts. It's all a bit complicated. But what it does mean is that the identifiable data stays on the NHS, and then we move it across into a safe haven, and we perform pseudonymization on that side before the data is released within the safe haven. Researchers can then access that safe haven environment. As we said, we don't have those safe objects. Little diagram on the right-hand side gives you an idea of one of the diagrams that researchers get when working with us, and we call it a data linkage plan. And as I say, sometimes these projects are quite complex, so we try and think that the picture can maybe paint some of those things that we can't always get written down. So the team provide support through the whole project. So from project registration, initiation, and that can be someone just emailing saying, is it possible to do this? Or someone actually having maybe a bit more of an idea and wanting to go for a grad. So you might look at feasibility. I give people an idea of what numbers their cohort might be. We do costings. We then take them through the project planning. So there they'll get help with the data requirements, the project approval support, and we'll do a data management plan and a data linkage plan. We've then got the analysis, well, the data linkage side, where we do data extraction, de-identification, linkage, and then into analysis. So number 4 is pretty much when the researcher gets access to the data. And then during that core period, we will do disclosure checking of analysis. And then even once the researcher finishes a project, we've still got to look after the archiving and then the final project closure and deletion of that data. Just a little bit of information on costs. They're all project specific. So we take into account a set access fee, the length of the project, the number of data sets, if you need any additional manipulation required. So sometimes people want to have like the Charleston score calculated for them, and we would cost for additional work for that. And then also your data storage and archive costs. What we found over the years is that people like to extend their projects quite a bit. And also researchers like to take a project that they've created and give it access to someone else and let them do some different analysis. And so we would have hosting costs as well. The access to this data is remote. So a lot of our projects are able to be accessed from their laptop, wherever they are. We do have a process for international transfers. That's maybe a slightly longer process, but that is possible as well. Effectively, the researcher must have done the training. They then sign a declaration. They get to do a pre-access call with our research coordinators, and then they use a lockdown remote desktop environment. We use terminal services. Other safe havens use Citrix. It is varied, but they all give the same access and that same lockdown procedure. So 12 years. When we first started, we had 6 people. That was 2 leads, Corey and myself, 2 research coordinators, of which Sharon was one, and 2 analysts. And I did a bit of the extractions as well. We now have 2 leads. We've got 4 research coordinators, 5 analysts, and in that time, we've created 5 different new roles. So we've grown from a team of 6 to, at the moment, a team of 16. I should state it's not equivalent to FTEs, but that is. So we have grown over the last 12 years. And as I said, there's no such thing as a standard project. So this gives you an idea of how long some of the projects stay with us as well. So the projects that are in red, and you can see that there's 17 of those still in analysis. So that means still being accessed by researchers, were registered with us over 5 years ago. There's 2 in pre-linkage, which means that they've taken a very long time for researchers to get the project permissions in place. It's maybe a little bit of a disservice when we look at some of this, because that 3-year period when COVID was in place, a lot of projects were put on hold then. But it gives you an idea that these projects last potentially a lot longer, but also I think gives you an idea that there's a vast amount of projects that the analysts and the research coordinators are dealing with at any one time. So if you can imagine, as a researcher, you've probably got one project that is important to you. The team have got, what's that, 37, 44, 46 different projects that are in analysis. So have to jump from those. So it's really complex service. And I think sometimes that maybe gets forgotten about when you're maybe a researcher's just focused on the one project. And I think the other thing to just say is DaSH has changed considerably over those 12 years as well. So whereas we did just originally do extractions and that was it, we now do teaching. So as Demetra says, it is marking. The team have done all their marking. Someone's maybe not quite finished their moderation, but that's on me. We also got involved in SHAPE. So you will all know the SHAPE project from Leslie, but that brought Yarrick into the team, who joined as a analyst for that project, and saw us create a second safe haven that focused on images and free text letters, and allowed companies to bring algorithms in, and also allowed us to investigate doing a different type of anonymization or pseudo-anonymization, where we did something called hidden in plain sight. We also now have been named on and applied for our own grants. That has brought in additional funds to the team, which have allowed us to keep the team at the size it is now. We've joined the HDR UK Gateway and used the HDR UK Gateway to advertise some of our data sets. We've joined the Alliance. We're part of the Safe Haven Network Federation. And all these add to the workload of the DaSH team as well. We should also have publications on there. I missed that one off, but the team, and in particular Kate, have been writing publications. We've done some specific projects as well. So there's been a lot of work done on the HDR UK transparency work. I'm not going to share too much of that because I believe that's an opportunity for people to come and talk about that at this session. So that gives you an idea of Safe Haven over the last 12 years. And yeah, it's going to be interesting times. We'll see what the next 12 years bring us. Certainly probably a lot more grey hair for me. Does anyone have any questions on DaSH?